Welcome to the deep dive, where we cut through the noise and deliver the insights you need.
Great to be here.
Today, we're diving headfirst into a story that honestly sounds like it was ripped straight from a political thriller.
It really does.
The surprising news that broke on August 22nd, 2025. The FBI conducted an early morning raid on the home and office of former National Security Advisor John Bolton.
Yeah, quite something.
We've pulled together a stack of recent reports, some exclusive interviews, sharp analyses.
Lots to unpack.
Exactly. And our mission is pretty clear. We're going to untack the details of this raid, try to understand the swirling why now questions.
That are crucial.
And most importantly, connect it directly to John Bolton's very public, very scathing criticism of the Trump administration's recent tariffs on India.
A direct link people are drawing.
From there, we'll explore the wider geopolitical ripples this is sending across U.S. foreign policy, international relations, the whole chessboard, really. By the end of this deep dive, you'll have the full picture, from the motivations behind this, well, dramatic raid, to its potential ripple effects on some really crucial global partnerships.
And what's immediately striking here is how a seemingly domestic legal move can cast such a long shadow internationally. This isn't just about a search warrant,
Yeah.
It's about the powerful signals it sends, both to political players at home and, frankly, to allies and adversaries across the globe.
That's precisely what makes this so compelling. So let's set the scene. What exactly unfolded on that Friday morning, August 22nd?
Well, the FBI made quite a statement without saying much officially. Early that morning, agents descended upon John Bolton's home in D.C.
Okay.
and his office out in Bethesda, Maryland. An Associated Press report noted Bolton himself was actually seen speaking with agents.
He was there.
He was there,
Yeah.
but not detained or charged with anything at that point. And we saw agents carrying bags into his office building, which strongly suggests they were collecting documents, maybe electronic devices, that sort of thing. It was a very visible operation.
Almost theatrical, you could say.
You could, yeah. It felt like it was meant to be seen.
And what was the official explanation for this very public, very high-profile move? Or was it more about the silence?
Well, the Justice Department itself remained officially tight-lipped. No direct comment on the raid itself. However, FBI Director Kash Patel, without explicitly naming Bolton, put in a statement insisting that, quote, nobody was above the law.
Okay. Vague but pointed.
Very. And he added that agents were on mission. Then Attorney General Pam Bondi, she amplified that message, resharing Patel's post and adding, America's safety isn't negotiable. Justice will be pursued. Always.
Wow. A lot of strong rhetoric there.
For what's supposedly about documents, yes. Very strong language.
On mission and justice will be pursued. It certainly sounds like a declaration of intent, doesn't it? So what specific mission were they supposedly on?
The stated reason, the official line, is an investigation into Bolton's handling of classified documents.
Okay.
Specifically related to his 2020 memoir, The Room Where It Happened.
Ah, that book. I remember the administration was furious about it back then.
Exactly. They'd accused it of containing classified information. But here's the really intriguing part, the timing.
Yeah.
It's crucial to remember that the Justice Department had actually closed both civil and criminal proceedings against Bolton over this very memoir.
They closed them. When?
Back in 2021. So the question isn't just what they're investigating, but why reopen it now?
That timing absolutely screams for deeper scrutiny. It feels less like a sudden discovery and more like, well, something else.
Precisely. It feels deliberate.
Okay, let's talk about the man at the center of the storm, John Bolton. For those who might not follow foreign policy quite so closely, who is he? Why does his opinion carry weight?
Well, Bolton is a very established figure. He's known for his consistent, quite hawkish foreign policy views, often described as neoconservative. Essentially, someone who advocates for a very assertive, sometimes interventionist, American role in global affairs. Big believer in American exceptionalism.
Right.
He's historically been a vocal skeptic of international organizations like the UN, taken very hardline stances on countries like Iran, even supporting regime change, and North Korea. Very skeptical in negotiations there.
Yeah.
Open to military force.
He's held major positions too, right?
Absolutely. He was U.S. ambassador to the UN under President George W. Bush and, of course, National Security Advisor in the first Trump administration.
Until he wasn't.
Right. He was fired in 2019 due to, let's say, significant policy disagreements with Trump.
So a high-profile falling out.
A very high-profile falling out. And what's really insightful about Bolton's current critique of Trump, calling him aberrational, isn't just that he's a critic, it's that his own consistent neoconservative stance makes that label far more potent. This isn't just a political rival speaking.
No, it's someone from within that hawkish wing.
Exactly. Someone who, despite maybe ideological alignment on many fronts, sees Trump as a fundamental, potentially dangerous deviation from established U.S. policy norms.
That's a critical distinction. So a highly experienced, deeply ideological figure who publicly clashed with Trump. And this brings us right back to those criticisms he leveled just days before the raid, the Trump administration's tariffs on India.
The timing is just stark.
It really is. This isn't just feeling like a legal procedure anymore. It feels like a dramatic act, almost a public spectacle. And critics see it as part of a larger political score settling.
That's definitely the argument being made.
It really pulls back the curtain on that political thriller we mentioned at the start. How are sources connecting this raid specifically to Bolton's recent statements on India?
Well, the connection is almost impossible to ignore, based on the timing alone. But sources like The Guardian, Dr. Russell Razak, they're strongly suggesting this raid is politically motivated, calling it a retaliatory federal investigation.
Retaliatory.
Yes. And it's significant that FBI Director Kash Patel, the same person making those on-mission statements, published a book back in 2023, Government Gangsters.
I remember hearing about that.
Right. And it apparently contained an appendix listing about 60 people he claimed had weaponized the government against Trump.
And Bolton?
Bolton is now the 5th person from that specific list to be investigated in just the last 7 months.
Wow. The 5th from that list.
The 5th. Following others like James Comey, John Brennan, Miles Taylor, Eltayan Kellogg, Alexander Vindman. That's quite a pattern. Not exactly a random coincidence, critics would argue.
So essentially something like a hit list, if you will, being systematically acted upon.
That's the implication many are drawing, yes.
And the method of the raid itself, the early morning timing, sealing off the street, the SUV's critics argue this wasn't just about getting documents from someone who's hardly a flight risk.
Exactly. That's a key part of the critique. The argument is that the theatrics were designed to humiliate and intimidate, to send a very public message, rather than simply secure documents from someone with no prior criminal record who lives publicly.
It gives the impression of a major criminal takedown.
Precisely. Which, for someone like Bolton, in this context, appears to many as an act of political theater meant to discredit him. And if you connect that to the broader picture,
it raises serious questions.
It raises profound concerns about the potential weaponization of federal law enforcement against political critics. A very serious charge.
And what about President Trump's reaction to all this? Did he shed any light or just add fuel to the fire?
Well, Trump initially claimed ignorance. Said, I don't know about it. I saw it on television this morning.
Plausible deniability.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
But he immediately followed that by launching into a string of highly personal attacks on Bolton.
Oh, I bet.
Called him a lowlife, not a smart guy, questioned his patriotism. The usual repertoire when Trump feels crossed.
Right. Highlighting that personal animosity.
Vividly. It's clearly deep-seated and has been simmering for years. He even made some rather colorful claims.
Such as?
Claiming Bolton forced Bush to do the ridiculous bombings in the Middle East. And then this almost bizarre tangent about how Bolton actually worked out great for me.
How so?
Because, Trump claimed, I'd walk into a room with him with a foreign country, and the foreign country would give me everything. Because they said, oh no, they're going to get blown up because John Bolton is there.
So using Bolton's hawkish reputation as leverage in his telling.
In his telling, yes. It's this mix of denial, personal attack, and then turning it into self-aggrandizement. It's classic Trump.
It certainly paints a picture of intense personal feeling there. Okay, let's pivot to the specific policy decision that Bolton had just been lambasting, these new tariffs on India. What exactly are they, and what was Trump's stated reasoning?
Okay, so at the beginning of August 2025, Trump imposed a 25% levy on a range of Indian imports. That was the first step. Then the really crucial part, an additional 25% ad valorem duty, meaning based on the value of the goods, was announced. This specifically targeted India's continued purchase of Russian oil.
So doubling the tariff effectively.
Bringing the total tariff to 50% for goods potentially linked to those oil purchases, yes. And this was set to be effective from August 27th.
And the justification.
Trump's primary justification, stated publicly, was that New Delhi was, in his view, helping Moscow prolong its war in Ukraine by maintaining those trade ties, particularly for energy.
Okay. And how did Bolton, the seasoned foreign policy hawk, react to these specific tariffs?
Bolton didn't mince words at all. He called the tariffs unforced errors, a mistake in the bilateral relationship, and just flat out a backward decision.
Strong language. What was his core argument?
His core argument was strategic. He said that by slapping tariffs on India for buying Russian oil, but not doing the same to China, which, let's be clear, also buys significant amounts of Russian oil.
A key point.
A very key point.
Yeah.
He argued the administration risked pushing India further into the Beijing-Moscow axis.
The opposite of intended U.S. strategy for decades.
Exactly. To Bolton, this demonstrated a profound lack of focus and, frankly, a lack of strategic thinking about the long-term consequences.
So he's seeing this not just as an economic misstep, but a potentially major strategic blunder for American influence in Asia.
Precisely. And he clarified something important about the existing sanctions, too.
What was that?
He pointed out that the existing sanctions, as written, don't prohibit what India did, which was buying Russian oil at or below the G7 price cap, around $60 a barrel, and potentially refining it for resale.
So India wasn't technically breaking the rules.
Not according to Bolton's reading of the sanctions. He suggested the real complaint, perhaps, lay with how the sanctions were drafted in the first place, because they had these contradictory goals, trying to reduce Russian revenue while also trying to keep global energy prices from skyrocketing.
A difficult balancing act.
Extremely difficult. And Bolton's wider concern, connecting this back to geopolitics, was that leaving India hanging out to dry as the only country on which punitive action has been taken makes it look like the U.S. has basically given up on India.
Undermining years of relationship building.
Exactly. Historically, multiple U.S. administrations, Republican and Democrat, built ties with India specifically to serve as a counterweight to China's growing influence. These tariffs, Bolton argues, threaten to unravel decades of that diplomatic effort and could actually drive India closer to China and Russia.
That's a pretty stark warning coming from a former national security advisor. It certainly makes you wonder about Trump's broader foreign policy motivations then, beyond just this specific tariff issue.
Indeed. And Bolton has thoughts on that, too. He frequently attributes many of Trump's foreign policy moves, including his efforts to sort of solve various global conflicts, to a deeply personal desire for Nobel Peace Prize.
The Nobel Prize motivation again.
Yes. He claimed Trump saw the apparent resolution of Pakistan-India tensions earlier as one of 7 wars out of 7 this year that he's ended. And was maybe hoping Ukraine would be the 7th notch on his belt, so to speak.
And Putin's role in this, according to Bolton.
Bolton suggested quite pointedly that Putin has demonstrated again his KGB agent training in manipulating Trump's desire for that prize.
How so?
The implication is that Putin skillfully plays on Trump's personal ambition, feeding this desire for accolades, and in doing so, manages to avoid harsher sanctions, like secondary sanctions on Russia's oil buyers. This is a cynical take, but
It fits the narrative of personal ambition driving policy.
it does, and it gets almost satirical. Pakistan's Army Chief General Munir actually offered to nominate Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize after that India-Pakistan de-escalation.
Seriously.
Yes. Which led Bolton to dryly suggest that maybe India's Prime Minister Modi could nominate Trump twice.
Wow. Okay. It certainly sounds like Bolton views Trump's foreign policy as highly personal, highly transactional, driven by a desire for visible wins.
That's a key theme in Bolton's critique, what he calls transactional diplomacy. Seeking concrete gains, tangible accomplishments.
Right.
Like how Trump reacts to, say, Ukraine offering to buy $90 billion worth of U.S. arms. He sees that as a clear win, maybe less as part of a complex, coherent strategy.
Right. And what about China in this transactional view?
Well, that's what Bolton finds particularly confused. Despite bipartisan calls from many in the U.S. for tougher measures on China, Trump's long-standing focus, Bolton notes, has often been on securing the biggest trade deal in history with China, which might explain, in Bolton's view, why China hasn't faced secondary sanctions on its Russian oil purchases, unlike India.
Even though China's trade practices are often criticized.
Exactly. Even though, as Bolton puts it, China is arguably the worst actor in international economics when it comes to things like intellectual property theft and trade imbalances.
So a lot of what we're seeing in Bolton's analysis isn't about a coherent long-term strategy.
Not in the traditional sense.
But more about personal ambition, short-term deals, transactional wins. And he consistently describes Trump's presidency overall as aberrational. Right?
Yes. He uses that word repeatedly.
Yeah.
And that's a crucial part of his framing. He's suggesting that Trump's actions don't reflect the permanent direction of U.S. policy, or even the broader, more traditional views within the Republican Party itself.
Trying to contain the perceived damage, perhaps?
Or at least frame it as temporary, an attempt to signal that this is an anomaly, not the new normal for U.S. foreign policy.
Okay, let's turn our focus fully to India now. What's the real economic fallout for them from these tariffs, and how are they responding? What does this mean for the future of U.S.-India ties?
The economic impact on India is potentially quite significant. You have to remember, the U.S. is India's largest single export market.
Biggest customer.
By far, it absorbs about 20% of India's total outbound trade. We're talking $86 billion worth of goods exported to the U.S. last year alone. And India runs a substantial trade surplus with the U.S., about $45 billion in 2024.
So these tariffs hit where it hurts.
Absolutely.
Okay.
A potential 50% tariff makes Indian goods much, much more expensive in the U.S. market. It drastically reduces their competitiveness.
Especially for certain industries.
Yes, particularly for labor-intensive industries like textiles and apparel. They were already facing tariffs, and some estimates suggest they could now face an overall tariffs burden of around 60%. That's a huge blow.
Ouch. What are the potential broader economic consequences for India, beyond just the export numbers?
Well, the real insight isn't just the top-line numbers, it's the potential ripple effect. Early estimates suggest India's overall goods exports to the U.S. could decline by nearly 30%.
30%.
Falling from that $86 billion figure down to maybe around $60 billion. This doesn't just hurt corporate bottom lines, it threatens to destabilize a really crucial job market for millions of young workers, particularly in manufacturing hubs. It could definitely exacerbate youth unemployment, which is already a concern in India.
A major domestic political issue, too.
Absolutely. Though, interestingly, pharmaceuticals were reportedly exempted from these new tariffs.
Why is that?
Likely because taxing essential medicines would ultimately harm U.S. consumers, driving up healthcare costs. A pragmatic exception, perhaps.
So how is India positioning itself in response? Do they have any leverage, any bargaining chips here?
Well, India isn't without its own protective measures. It's important to note. They currently impose an average tariff of about 17% on U.S. imports.
Oh.
But it goes up much higher, up to nearly 39%, specifically on agricultural goods.
And the rationale there?
Their rationale is crucial. It's about protecting their massive domestic agriculture sector. This sector employs nearly 46% of India's workforce. That's about 280 million people.
Wow, huge number.
Huge. And it's vital for national food security. Indian farmers, typically with much smaller farm sizes and less mechanization, simply can't compete head-to-head with large-scale, heavily subsidized U.S. agriculture without some protection.
Makes sense. So what can India actually do now?
Their potential responses are varied. They could try to maintain firmness, dig in their heels. They could also provide financial relief to their exporters to cushion the blow, things like subsidizing interest rates on loans, or extending existing export incentive programs like RADITEP or RACTL, which help offset taxes and duties.
Looking inward to soften the impact, any external bargaining chips?
Well, India's critical services exports are a big one. Think IT services, the global capability centers that are vital to many U.S. companies. That's significant leverage.
True, the service sector connection is huge.
Another potential area, though perhaps more complex, could involve healthcare, potentially offering greater opportunities for Indian physicians to provide remote medical services to U.S. patients if regulatory hurdles like recognition of Indian medical degrees could be overcome. That could open a new avenue.
Interesting possibilities. But beyond the economics and the maneuvering, it sounds like this situation is causing some serious damage to the fundamental trust between the two nations.
Absolutely. That might be the biggest casualty in the long run. Many commentators in India are viewing the U.S. actions as, well, brutal and coercive.
Especially feeling singled out.
Exactly. Especially feeling singled out while China, a major strategic rival for both countries, was not hit with similar secondary sanctions. Concerns are running really high now about the reliability of the U.S. as a strategic partner.
Which impacts things like defense cooperation.
Critically, especially in areas like defense technology co-development, where India has made significant long-term commitments based on trust in the U.S. partnership. Bolton himself acknowledged this, talking about the hypocrisy of America in this situation and the damage it does to decades of effort to build that trust with India.
Decades of work potentially undermined. So given all this turbulence, what's Bolton's practical advice for India on how to navigate this incredibly difficult, unpredictable period?
His advice is quite pragmatic, actually. Essentially, he advises India to grit your teeth and look longer term, meaning understand that Trump is, in his view, aberrational and likely temporary in the grand scheme of American politics. He suggests India should aim to keep the damage to the bilateral relationship at a minimum right now
Containment.
and be prepared to repair it quickly once Trump eventually leaves office, whenever that might be.
Looking beyond the current administration, any immediate steps suggested?
He also offered a more immediate, maybe slightly surprising suggestion that Prime Minister Modi could perhaps meet Trump privately, maybe leverage the upcoming UN General Assembly in September.
To do what? Clear the air.
Exactly, to try and clear the air. Bolton believes this could leverage what was, by many accounts, a previously good personal relationship between the two leaders to try and de-escalate the current tensions directly.
That's a very practical, inside baseball piece of advice from someone who understands the dynamics. And just briefly, what about U.S.-Pakistan ties in this context? Did Bolton mention any shift there?
He did note what he perceived as an increasing bonhomie, a growing warmth between the U.S. and Pakistan recently.
And his explanation for that?
He suggested it stems partly from Trump taking personal credit for helping resolve those India-Pakistan tensions after a terrorist attack in Kashmir earlier, viewing it as another accomplishment.
Feeding into the Nobel Prize narrative again?
Feeding right back into that narrative of transactional, personally driven foreign policy wins.
Okay, wow. We have certainly covered a lot of ground today. We kicked off with what sounded like a political thriller, that FBI raid on John Bolton.
Which it still kind of feels like.
It does. And we discovered just how deeply it seems intertwined with his very outspoken criticism of the Trump administration's tariffs on India. This whole situation just vividly reveals these layers of domestic political tension bubbling up in the U.S. The incredible complexities of international relations and how interconnected it all really is. We've explored the significant potential economic fallout for India and these contrasting, almost clashing foreign policy philosophies at play.
And this deep dive really highlights how internal political dynamics, maybe even personal vendettas, can spill over so dramatically onto the global stage. It affects trade, it affects long-standing alliances, it can even affect the perception of justice itself.
Yeah.
It's a powerful reminder, really, of how crucial it is to look beyond just the immediate headlines. You have to consider the deeper motivations, the potential strategic blunders, and the real long-term consequences of these political actions.
So what does this all mean for you as you watch these geopolitical chess moves unfold? It really challenges us to think critically about leadership, about loyalty, about the very fabric of international partnerships in uncertain times. And it leaves us with this provocative thought. When an administration is accused, rightly or wrongly, of weaponizing its legal and economic powers against both its domestic critics and its international allies alike, what does that ultimately do to the stability of the global order?
A crucial question.
And maybe even more pressing, how do nations, like India in this case, navigate such an unpredictable landscape when they're searching for reliable, trustworthy partnerships, especially when the rules seem to change so rapidly? It's definitely something to ponder long after the headlines fade.